Hi. Hi everyone. This is Kiran. I've spent about 15 years in the internet and digital industries. Worked with various startups in payments, e-commerce, and have advised corporates on how to digitize. I am today honored to be part of a panel member, a panel which is very eminent and experienced people from the industry. I'm going to ask them to each introduce themselves, and we're largely going to be talking about how should businesses approach digitization, what are the steps, how to go about it, irrespective of whichever stage they are in the journey. With that, I'm going to hand over to the panelists. Deepak, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. Hey, Kiran. My name is Deepak. I lead the data science practice at Publicis Group in India. So I've been here for a couple of years, and then seeing in real time, how COVID has impacted customer journey, and then how our companies are, using our data a lot more, to improve their understanding of the customer and respond to COVID. Prior to that, I have had experience working with analytics companies like Uray Consulting, Nielsen, and immediately prior to Publicis, I was at Cognizant. So I have experience spanning both India and US. So I can bring a perspective of both the continents. Thank you.
Matthew?
Hi. So firstly, thank you very much for having me join the call today. A little bit of history. I'm from Australia. Lived the last 20 years in Malaysia. Had previously worked with the Malaysian government, heading up foreign direct investment. So bringing all the investment into the country. More recently, as an investor, and also recently invested into a travel startup, which is quite a bizarre thing to invest in during a pandemic. I'll share more with that during our conversation. But we're doing things very differently. So it's about bringing new technologies and a new way of promoting tourism. A little bit more. We've just raised money for the startup. So we raised about 7 million ringgit, which is really interesting, raising money for a travel startup in the middle of a pandemic. And what's really interesting, the last thing, I know this is only an introduction, but the last thing is really interesting. So our founder is a British fellow. At the moment, he's in Seychelles on his way back to London, and we've built a global company in the middle of a pandemic. So we've got our COO in Spain, our CMO is in London, our director of marketing is in Singapore, our post-production team is in Indonesia, and I'm here in Malaysia, and I've worked with the company for 12 months, and I've not met anyone. So it's all been via Zoom. So this is I think this is really interesting, and it's part of what we're talking about today is how digitization and technology has really transformed the way that we're doing business, and we can be a testament to that.
That's great. Congratulations on the fundraise and all the best. Not meeting people from work is normal now, but starting a travel startup and raising money during the pandemic is definitely not normal. So all the best there. Pedro?
Hi, my name is Pedro Uría-Recio. I am the Chief Analytics and AI Officer in True Digital Group, which is the digital division of True Corporation. That is a telecom conglomerate in Thailand. Prior to this, I was the group head of analytics and AI in Axiata Group, based in Kuala Lumpur, which is a telecom conglomerate as well, right? My area of expertise is data analytics, and more particularly, how we can use data analytics in corporate ventures. That's to say, startups that are created within a corporate environment and how we can grow them into successful businesses.
So just to ask you that question, Dev, so how big is this corporate venture?
Well, Digital Group is around 2,000 employees at this moment, and there are different ventures in different areas. I'm leading the data analytics one, but there is IoT, there is cybersecurity, there is a streaming platform. So we have a large number of ventures.
And then how does it feel to move into Bangkok in the middle of the pandemic? I mean, it's the travel hub of the world. after Paris, I suppose?
I have done it multiple times during this month. So I have gone to Singapore, stayed in Singapore in quarantine for 3 weeks, come back to Malaysia, now in Bangkok. I just got out of the quarantine in Bangkok yesterday. So yeah, I mean, travel is still possible. It's just that you have to do quarantines at this moment. But I have done, this is my third one, plus the one in March last year is 4 quarantines I have done. Yeah. So it's not easy to move homes during the pandemic. No, it's not easy at all.
So Matthew, your investors are very smart. They're seeing the travel trends happening and have placed a good bet then.
Yeah, it's been really interesting to watch what's happened to the tourism and hospitality industry. I mean, you know, I don't think we've seen this before in our lifetime, and probably we won't see it in any lifetime in the near future, where the travel industry and hospitality industry is completely stopped globally, not just one country or one continent, but globally. The whole travel industry is stopped. So what we've found is that it's led to a lot of innovation, and because it's, you know, it's about survival now. It's not just about, you know, when times are good, hotels, they don't need to transform. They don't need any new digital technologies, because you know, they're making bookings off Booking.com or Agoda or their own websites, direct bookings. And you try to talk to them 2 years ago, say, oh, you know, you should go through a technology transformation program, you know, to look at VR, to look at AI. And 2 years ago, I would assume that hotels would say, yes, that's interesting, but it's not a priority. And now what we've found is, over the last 18 months, I mean, the hospitality industry is a lot more receptive to talk about any sort of innovative approaches or any sort of technology, which is going to help them sort of navigate through the recovery period. So, I mean, as we all know, you know, like I said, the hospitality industry has suffered a 90% on average, a 90% drop in revenue over the last 18 months. And now when we're, you know, our company, for instance, is, you know, is a travel startup. It's called Igotopia. Under that company, we have Igo Room, which is the world's first online travel agent powered by virtual reality. So it's taking the hotels to the people. And we've seen a great need in creating technologies which will enable hotels and leisure outfits to, you know, to show what they're doing and what they've got without the normal static pictures and the very mundane way that you'd normally research online.
Deepak, you've been in the market. You're exposed to more industries, and so is this a common trend? Is everybody who were not worried about creating their own digital journey working towards a digital journey now? Is it something which is rampant across industries, or is it specific to industries which are hard hit by COVID?
So Kiran, what I would say is that, you know, every industry is, you know, undergoing some form of digitization. Some industries are ahead. So for example, like, you know, banking, consumer, telecom, you know, they have always been in their digital journey. And then, you know, based on my previous experience with Cognizant, what I see is, you know, some of the, you know, the traditional industries, you know, they're also undergoing a digitization journey.
So any new sectors you think are coming into the market now which were not before?
So I would say, like, you know, the traditional industrial companies, for example, like the steel company or, you know, any manufacturing company. So they always had the data. So the what they were thinking is that, you know, how we can use the data to better bring in more efficiencies in our process. So, you know, coming up with some dashboards around, you know, how the different parts of, you know, the plants are performing, or, you know, how we can, you know, automate some of the tasks, or, you know, how we can bring AI and analytics to, you know, bring in more efficiencies. One of the use cases that I saw in the steel company was, you know, the parts they are coming in, they are always flowing. Now they had some people that are manually checking those parts. So they said that, you know, instead of, you know, relying upon a manual person, can I bring in AI, look at the parts, and do they conform to the standards, and then flag out things in an automated manner. So yes, this thing is happening, and then the industries are catching up on this.
So process industries have been digitizing, or not digitizing, let me say automating for some time, especially steel, coal, energy, even
Yeah.
cement for that matter. So other than manufacturing, do you see any other traditional businesses, need not be production alone, but anybody else? Because is this trend catching up, or is it people who already started the journey are going faster, and people who were affected are jumping in faster? How would you classify this shift?
Okay, so Kiran, I won't have the numbers. So, but what I see is that so a lot of industries are catching up. I know Matthew talked about the new trends about AI and IoT. And last year, there was this news around in India, some of the forests, even the government departments, so they are catching up with the digitization journey. An example is that in a lot of rural areas where the train tracks are there, you see reports of train engines hitting elephants. So they said that can we use something for example the robots or things like the copters to catch these images and then flag the elephants on the track, and then maybe the maneuver the trains this train speed based on how you spot these elephants. So yes, every industry, even the government departments, they are catching up with this digitization, I would say.
Clear. So Pedro, since it seems to be a general trend that digitization is something which most corporates are pursuing, most industries. As a practitioner who stepped into a traditional company and worked in trying to digitize them or create a digital venture inside them, is there a particular journey you would recommend? Where do we start? That's the first question in most people's mind.
Absolutely. I think the right place to start will be the area in which most corporates typically make mistakes, the area that is the most important one when it comes to the transformation, and that area is people. The most difficult part about driving a digital transformation or a data transformation is to make the corporate behave like a startup, and that involves changing the mindsets and the behaviors of the management, of the people, of the employees, of everybody in the company, right? And there are a number of things there. One of the first things is number one, hire and acquire skills that were not present before the transformation. Data scientists, developers, Scrum Masters, there are a lot of skills that are required, and corporations typically don't have them. The second one will be to instill collaboration across all these different people that have been hired, as well as with the people that were in traditional parts of the business. How do you make a data scientist talk to a business person in marketing? That's very difficult to make because they speak very different languages. You don't understand each other. So making them collaborate is very, very difficult. And the third part will be, how do you make all these different actors that we have hired, all these different actors that were there, to start experimenting new ways of doing work? How do we make them to look at data, and based on that data to start doing campaigns in different ways, to start experimenting with different kinds of campaigns, understanding which campaigns work, understanding which changes in procedures work, understanding what are the right products that should be offered to customers. And that requires a lot of experimentation. Experimentation is how startups learn, right? So startups start working with different customers and understand from the customers what makes sense and what doesn't make sense, what can be sold and what cannot be sold. And typically, corporates find it very difficult. Corporates prefer to have a plan and follow the plan. And those plans are typically made by the management, but they are not made by listening to the customer. And this is very, very important. So data analytics is something that allows us to understand what all the millions of customers that we have are thinking about our products, and understand how we can put everything together to continue growing. So this is what I work on. And this is what I have been doing here in True Digital Group, and what I was doing before in Axiata. And even before, when I was a consultant in McKinsey, we were working on all these kind of different transformations.
So how easy or difficult is it to hire? How do you source these capabilities? How do you identify which capabilities to source? an organization which has not done any of this in the past, when they start the journey, how do they identify what resources and how expensive and who is the right person to hire? And this is an open question. It's not just for Pedro.
Yeah, maybe I'm gonna start. You need to have an idea about what are the areas in which you are expecting to drive that change.
Okay.
So if you are a retailer, you need to understand what kind of things you want to do, and you need to understand what skills are required for that. So if you want to experiment with new prices, if you want to experiment with a loyalty program, if you want to experiment with an app, if you want to experiment with e-commerce, you will require different kinds of skills. So the first thing that you have to understand is what is the transformation that you want to drive, what is the kind of change that you want to drive. And for that, you will need to do a lot of soul search inside the organization to understand what you want to change. Once you know what you want to change, you can start addressing the market and hiring people, right? My area is analytics, right? I will tell you that when it comes to analytics, sometimes for specific industries, it's very difficult to hire. There are industries that data scientists or any kind of digital professional, the digital professionals don't find them attractive enough. For example, if you are in heavy industries, if you are in, I don't know, a supermarket, if you are a fertilizer company, is probably these kind of industries are not attractive for digital professionals, right? And that is a challenge. If you are in insurance, if you are in banking, if you are in e-commerce, it will be much easier for you to hire, right? So it's not always easy to hire digital talent. And what you have to do is to make it attractive for them to join. And there are different ways of doing that. One way is creating a digital division. This is something that, for example, here in Thailand, a lot of companies are doing. We were one of those, but there are others. There is Central Group. There are many other companies. There is Axiata Group in Malaysia. Creating a digital division makes it exciting, a digital division where you have young people and you can start hiring these kind of people. Incentives. Some companies are starting to give ESOP, employee stock option plans in their digital ventures, which is something very new, but it's also something that helps to attract talent. So yeah, there are very different ways of doing this, but for certain industries, it's difficult to attract that talent.
So Deepak, how easy or difficult is it, you think, to set those, as Pedro put it, how easy or difficult is it to do that soul searching to arrive at those target areas where you want to achieve transformation?
So Kiran, so there is no one right place to start. I think it is, we have to look at the industry trend, where we think the industry is going to be 3 years from now. And then start from, what sort of change do we want to drive in? Okay. So for example, we are a marketing agency. Now we have to look at how customers are evolving, or how we look at in our industry, consumers are moving from, TV to digital targeting. And second thing, what we see is that, with cookies going away, we have to look for more personalized communication to the customer. So then we have to think in terms of, what are the array of, technologies that are available, and then what sort of capabilities that we have to bring to, drive that change essentially. So that's the way. And then other thing that, Kiran,
how easy is it?
It's it's a very pretty fluid word, I would say. For example, like in our case, our partner system is pretty diverse. We are working with Google for targeting the customers, or it could be Facebook. Amazon is evolving. And then, recently there was a report in Economist that, even the digital advertising landscape is, going to become very fragmented. So, so we are, in a shape, where ecosystem is constantly evolving. So
from a client's perspective, say for example, one of the examples you took before, a steel manufacturer.
Sure.
How easy is it for a steel manufacturer to do this soul searching and setting a goal for themselves, or setting some kind of identifying areas that they want to transform?
Sure. So again, so Kiran, it will also depend upon, at what level of the organization that you're dealing with, and then how amenable is, the person, able to change. So what we have seen is, and having talked to friends that, some of the, younger generation, who have, maybe more exposed to analytics, they are more amenable to change. So maybe it is more not about, identifying the areas to change. It is, identifying the stakeholders who are more willing, more receptive to change.
Does it change organization to organization?
That's the trend that we have seen. Some people, like, they are more resistant to change, and then some people, like, they are more amenable. So for example, like in a steel, yeah. So in a steel industry, what may happen is, the top management, they may feel that, what, things are working, why do we need to change? But the younger generation, who, or maybe the people that are more exposed to these, digital, so they may feel that, okay, I see these other industries changing and I need to change, otherwise, I may fall behind. So maybe, working with these people, like, who are more interested, and then, you can drive the change agenda for these industries.
Matthew, do you see it practically possible for, what's your input on who should be driving the change before we decide what to change?
Yeah, well, I think a lot of things have changed, especially during COVID. This top-down approach is not the only approach anymore, and I agree with Deepak on a lot of the things that he just mentioned, because I've come from working for a Fortune 500 company, then working with the Malaysian government, and now in the startup scene, and working with startups. And what we've seen is, you tend to be talking more to your industry or your experts within your team. So rather than just having this top-down approach where this is the way that we're going to do it, it's a very structured process. And I think this is what Pedro was talking about before. Is formally it becomes a lot more of a structured process in a large corporation, where now there's everything's gone online. Your meetings are via Zoom. They're a lot more direct. There's a clear agenda which has been set for every meeting, rather than just having one person doing all of the speaking. So I've seen a transformation in the way that companies disseminate information from their employees, and also how they're implementing new strategies and new plans. Like, for instance, one of the trends that I've really noticed lately is obviously the way that you're doing digital marketing, and I think Axiata would have a very an opinion on this as well from when Pedro used to work there. But what I've seen in particular is the market is moving really fast. So it's gone from print media to digital media to influencers, to social media influencers, to micro influencers. It's gone through a very fast change from paying influencers to come in. Now there's a big tectonic shift which is happening right now, where influencers will get immediate gratification, which means they will align with brands, and they will sell through, either they're a micro influencer with like 5,000 followers, or they can be a major influencer with millions of followers. And what we're seeing now is we're seeing a massive shift and a digital shift in the way that companies market their products and services, and the way that the instant gratification that these influencers get allows them to really hone in and only focus on 6 or 8 brands at any one time, and I see a massive change.
So from whatever I'm hearing, and I'm just trying to collect everything in. So you're saying you don't know where it could start, but you have to look deep within the organization. It could be from the bottom, it could be from the top, to find the right place where there are people interacting with industry or customers or who have the exposure to be able to see a path, and then we need to support it by hiring experts who bring the capability to walk the journey. Is that fairly what we are? And
Yes.
that incentives could be ESOPs, could be anything else, tools, whatever else that
Yeah.
we think is right. Is that something that we? Is that what you're saying? Is that?
Yeah, so Kiran, I think you are right. I think you pointed out rightly that we need to bring in a subject matter expert who can drive this agenda. But then so as I said that there could be different parts in the organization. There could be some inhibition. Okay, so we need to bring digitization as a part of this KPI.
Correct.
Otherwise, this person could be driving the agenda, but there's no adoption in the other parts of the organization.
No. From what I heard Pedro say, he was saying something slightly different. He was saying find the people who can set goals, who are interacting, and support them with capabilities that they need. So the hiring is for capabilities. It's not a digitization. Am I right, Pedro? Correct me if I'm wrong in this in something.
Yeah, you are hiring for skills. You are hiring for skills that you need in the transformation. So first you decide what skills you will need. And in order to do that, the only way you can do that is by listening to the client and understanding from those conversations with the client what you want to become to serve the client better. And once you understand that, you hire the skills you need. And listening to the client is the first thing. That's the first step in the soul searching process.
Perfect. So Deepak, so are you suggesting that the skills the expert we hire for, say, digital marketing or online advertising or technology development or analytics or are you saying we should set digitization KPIs for those people? Is that what you're suggesting?
Not for the Kiran. So I think so I think just to add to what Pedro is saying, hiring is imperative. What I'm also saying is that if you're just building these capabilities in isolation, but then if there's no broad-based adoption within the organization,
correct,
then you will not be able to drive that change agenda.
So you actually the item that he had said, which is instill collaboration.
Instill collaboration, bring it in their KPI so that other people are part of this change process essentially.
Which is frankly the toughest thing to do in a organization which is traditionally been successful, built a large business, etc. So let's spend some time on that part, which is very important. I hear many suggestions, ESOPs, joint ownership of KPIs. So let's how do we drive this culture of collaboration in traditional organizations which are very functionally siloed as we speak, maybe before COVID? How has it changed? How do we drive it? What should the organizations do? Anyone, please start.
So one, so go ahead. So one thing, obviously we can do is, we can, go to these, silos and say that, okay, just give them proof points that, this digitization does bring, incremental benefits. We are not just doing digitization or, we're not doing, data analytics, just for the sake of doing. So there is, it does bring an incremental benefit. So going to them with the case studies and then partnering with them to identify use cases on, how we can approach digitization with those people. Because, you just cannot, ramrod your agenda up, to the different people. These are, senior leaders, you have to respect their agenda. So just how do we collaborate with them and then, identify use cases. And then, build upon those success.
Yeah, I think without that, it requires to lead by example. What you cannot do, and many corporates do, is you cannot say, let's innovate, let's find new ideas. And then, well, they come back and they give you a number of ideas. And you say, and now you're going to give me a 5-year business plan. No, because if you are asking them for a 5-year, I mean, startups don't make 5 years business plan, right? Or you tell them, and now you have to, no, and now I'm going to give you a KPI that is misaligned with the idea that you are bringing me, but it's totally aligned with the core business. right? I'm going to give you a KPI that is promoting the core business, but it's not promoting your internal, your corporate venture startup idea, right? I think what has to be done is, first of all, as a leader, you have to be driving the transformation by leading by example. You have to start collaborating with other departments. If you are a chief, you have to start collaborating with the other chiefs. You have to start communicating across digital platforms. Forget about email, start using Slack, start using other tools, start using the same tools that your developers are using, right? Then you have to, I would say, start experimenting. Forget about having multi-year business plans. Just experiment with different ideas. Just provide for every idea that is worth, that you think has a chance of succeeding, provide them with a small budget and tell them to experiment with that idea in the market with that small budget and come back with the results that that idea gave. And if this idea brings good results, then invest more money into that idea. The same way a startup will do, the same way a venture capitalist will do, right? So changing the mindset and leading by example is very important, but it's very difficult because corporate leaders are not used to that. And that is I think that's the key success factor. If you are not behaving like a corporate startup, you are not going to thrive in a digital transformation.
What any point of view, Matthew?
Yeah, you know the one thing which I caught from your chat just then, Pedro, is the way that we communicate. It is, I mean, I'm old school. I went to school in the 80s, and everything. That was the birth of computers. Back in the 80s, when we had a Commodore 64 or a TRS-80, and then went through the computer age in the 90s, and then everything went from writing down to sending emails. And then what we've seen is then all of this mobile messaging was introduced a few years ago, and it sort of was more for social rather than for business. But what we've found, especially over the last 18 months, is everything has to be instant. So you've got all of these Zoom meetings or Microsoft Team meetings where you're having a lot of face-to-face interaction. And what I've in particular found is when people now are asked to be sent an email, I'm really against it. I say, because it's going to take me, number one is it's going to take me a lot of thought process to actually draft out an email. And I don't know what the result of that email is going to be. So having this instant communication, I think is not only something which has been really accelerated during COVID, but I think this is the new normal. The new normal is the fact that if you send a message to someone, you want an answer and you want to be able to resolve it immediately. So I think that the digital transformation regarding how we communicate has been a huge impact. And there's no turning back to even how we operated 2 years ago.
Interesting. I mean, I'm hearing very interesting perspectives here. On one hand, we're saying we have to walk the talk. It can't be something external, and you have to live it. And even these smaller cues get picked up when you're leading it in terms of you're driving the change. And number two, I'm hearing is you can't throttle the chicken before it's hatched. You can't put KPIs and targets and accountabilities right away, but drive smaller experiments, faster results, independent work, and then showcase it, bring it back into the organization. That's a very is experimenting easy for an organization which is traditional? Do they have budgets and time and even manpower? Because you need the biggest investment, if you ask me, is time. So do they have the bandwidth to be able to do that?
Let me tell you this. Sometimes organizations typically put innovation under the standard corporate structures and processes that have been there for a long time, in terms of budget, in terms of procurement, in terms of KPIs, in terms of HR, and that constrains innovation a lot. if you have a yearly budgeting process for, even if you have the budget, I mean, if you have a yearly budgeting process for your innovation ideas, well, 1 year is too long time for innovation. Maybe you have to do it quarterly. If you have a number of HR processes to evaluate performance yearly as well, right? Or to pay people in a certain way, in the way that they are paid in corporate, that is probably not going to work in an innovation environment, in a corporate startup environment, right? If you require 3 quotations every time you have to buy something, that is also probably not going to work if you are in a digital environment, because you are not going to have 3 quotations, because the time it takes you to get 3 quotations, somebody has already developed it, right? So in a digital world, you need to allow somebody to pay with a credit card and claim it back. So there are a lot of changes in support functions that are necessary to make innovation thrive.
Very interesting. Very interesting. Deepak, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, so I think, Kiran, the way I would put it is that, because so when we are doing innovation, there is always an element of risk. So maybe encouraging risk taking is important, because, we just cannot say that, something failed, so we'll not try it again. So yeah, so beyond the investment, maybe encouraging this risk taking, so that we try a few things, so that ultimately it succeeds. So
yeah, because the organizations today don't have that extra buffer. We've been driving efficiency now for almost 50 years in terms of people, in terms of processes, in terms of machines, in terms of cash. All across the organization, we've practically squeezed out all the available extra room. And correct me if I'm wrong, Pedro. When you compare this with startups, one of the things that I've heard often repeated from corporate leaders is, I just don't understand what they're going to do with so much money, what they're going to do with so many people. And if you're going to twist around and try 20 things and fail in 19 of them, I think that's so. How do you handle that in a corporate venture kind of a situation? Does a corporate set up separate money? How does it work?
You mean that corporate leaders don't understand what ventures are going to do with so much money, or means that they are overfunding their ventures? That what you mean? Or I'm not sure.
So it depends on the person's perspective. I'm not coming. But there's always this little what do you call it? Question, wonder that you're throwing too much money into a sector. How are you going to make money? So that's like a.
Okay. So you mean like, for example, the sector of e-commerce or ride-hailing, in which investors are throwing money, but it's unclear how that money is going to be recovered. That's what you mean? Yeah.
As compared to a corporate environment where efficiency initiatives and budget control and people processes tightening, etc., has squeezed out all the extra room over a long period of time.
Okay, I get you. I get what you mean. Okay, typically what you have to do in a corporate environment is to separate the ventures from the core business, because the ventures and the core business have very different KPIs. The core business is a cash cow. It has to deliver cash fast. The ventures are not a cash cow. The ventures are experimenting with new ideas, and over time, they hopefully become a cash cow, but they are not going to do it in the first 2, 3, 4, maybe even longer years. Right? So something that is very important is to separate them completely into separate legal entities that have different KPIs from a financial perspective. Otherwise, what will be happening is that the core business will overwhelm or starve the ventures. They have to be separated, right? And then another consideration is, well, maybe you are, this is what we were talking about before. Maybe you are investing into a sector where there is too much competition, everybody is throwing money, you have unicorns already, you have Chinese players that are investing billions in that particular industry. Well, that basically means that is an industry where it will be too late for you to enter, right? And you better stay out of that industry. And one example will be, well, ride-hailing, or other examples, e-commerce, etc., right? But it is a good practice to have a different accounting and a different budgeting and really a different legal entity for your innovation as for your core business, because otherwise it will be very difficult to set the financial KPIs that are going to make both of them function properly.
So Matthew, I'm asking the exact opposite. You're just setting up a startup, you're building a team. You don't want to bring in these efficiency agenda at this stage. I'm sure. I'm sure that's something which you would like to postpone to as long as possible, before, as far away as possible. But in practice, the functional people you're hiring could be finance, could be whatever design, could be manufacturing, could be technology. They're from an industry which is so efficiency seeking. How do you handle that in a startup? How do you ensure that those things don't come into your culture?
No, it's a great question, and I think one of the, I mean, going back to looking at this last 18 months since COVID began, actually we've seen some really interesting companies emerge, and I noticed Pedro was talking about e-commerce as a saturated market and being dominated by, by the big players like Alibaba, like Lazada, like eBay, and so forth. And I totally agree with that. Although I've just witnessed a startup successfully raise money, not my company, but another startup in micro brands. So they've been able to find a niche in the e-commerce space. And I think, again, I think this is really relevant because we're talking about, I mean, today's discussion is about obviously technology and digital disruption, but it's also, what's really relevant is the disruption of business models. That is, you've seen new companies come into space, which you've seen, predominantly have been, being controlled by the large players. So, like for instance, the company which I'm involved in, it's in a very saturated market, which is the tourism and hospitality space, and it's an online travel agent, which is dominated by the four big players like Booking.com, Expedia, Agoda, Traveloka. And when we went out there to raise money, everybody said to us in the middle of a pandemic, are you guys crazy? You're launching a travel company, you're launching a startup, the big guys will gobble you up. But the thing is, again, I agree with what has been discussed here is there's opportunity for disruption right now, and getting back to the thing which you're asking is companies like ours. Yes, we're in startup mode, so we've been able to get really good team players who have domain experts. So, from developing mobile app, it's really important that we have very strong mobile app development. We have very strong operational people and very strong marketing people. But it's a very different way of recruiting and also retaining and incentivizing those people now. Because like I said at the outset of this call, is, I came into the company 12 months ago, which means we're already 6 months into COVID. And we've built a team all around the world. And I've only ever met the founder. All of our other team members I've only met via Zoom. So I'm actually flying to London next month to meet our team for the very first time. But I've been working there. We've been, and it's really interesting. I mean, having these, these meetings via Zoom. I mean, you get into heated conversations, talking about strategy, talking about budget and things. And then you sort of take a step back and you realize, hey, I've never actually met the team before. So I think, it's really thrown a spanner on the way that we would typically operate companies, set up companies, and the way that we grow the company as well has really been transformed over the last 18 months.
Wonderful. It's a mix of being able to empower people to set the agenda, try experiments, be able to hire the right set of people, and also be able to fund the time and the budgets required for running these experiments. And I think, like Pedro said, most importantly, a leadership which walks the talk and sends direct and indirect cues that they mean business, or they seriously want to pursue a transformational goal. It's been great talking to you guys, and it's been a great perspective. Thank you for such a candid discussion, and please feel free to add a few words if in case you think you want to wrap up with something. But otherwise, good talking to you guys, and thanks for this. Thanks for this. It's been great.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Have a nice day. Bye.